Hello, welcome to Woman with Bunny Ears, a Twin Peaks podcast. This is Season 1, Episode 1, and we will be discussing Neon Genesis Evangelion, the original television show and the movie End of Evangelion. I am your host, currently walking by an active highway, Flashy Man. This is my co-host, currently drying his hair, Jason.
Hello.
And this is our very special guest, the theme song crooner, the Sultan of Swing.
Hi.
All right. So, how'd y'all like Evangelion?
Well, where to start? As influential as Ava has been, I don't think there's ever been a show that is quite like it. I mean, it will draw every mecha fan's ire to say that Ava is the very first mecha show where the focus is on the pilots rather than the robots. But I think there is something very special about Ava that makes it so that its fandom is not just like a perfect overlap of fandoms of, like, say, Gundam or your typical giant robot fare.
I have to confess, I have seen approximately 0 other giant robot shows.
What I like about it is all the giant robot fights.
Those are pretty good.
Yeah, they're really well done, especially near the end. Without giant
Yes.
robots, I'd just feel like this really sad kid in high school.
Yeah, and yet you come for the giant robots, and, well, I guess it depends on the viewer as to whether or not they stay for the personal drama and themes of personal struggle and mental health and such.
I liked particularly the very strange nature of the giant robots and the weird, especially during the later episodes. I thought some of the middler episodes it was pretty straightforward. You know, you could just pretend they were regular giant robots and everything was hunky dory. But near the later episodes, the ones that were still focused on the giant robots, everybody started talking about the psychological and physical nature of the giant robots and their special powers in a way that I found extremely pleasing for some reason.
Yes, because you see, they're not just robots.
Ooh,
They're also
they're
giant
robots in
people.
disguise.
Yes, well, disguised as robots. The robot
My
is the
God.
disguise.
Incredible.
And it's interesting in that it's pretty transparent about the fact that there's something very fleshy underneath all the steel cabling from as early as, like, the second episode, and yet it's not really some ways in that the other shoe finally drops.
They do a great job teasing out how unsettling it is with just how, like, I mean, you're almost lulled into this false sense of security, and then it's, the thing starts like lumbering on all fours like an ape, and then it starts eating this thing with got like these shiny white teeth. There's something like just so creepy about the juxtaposition that I don't know. Even having seen it like 1,000 times, just that that whole reveal really gets to me.
Yes, fun fact, the sort of very low-pitched wail that the Eva lets out after it finishes eating the angel whose name is revealed in the additional materials as Zeruel, but I'll just refer to him as that since it's easier to say that than the 14th angel. But that very low and animalistic sounding wail is actually one of the voice actresses doing that, slowed down and pitched down substantially.
Wasn't it Shinji's mother's voice actress?
Yes, who coincidentally
Nice.
is also the voice actress of Rey.
Wow. What a crazy random
Just to further
happenstance.
the connection between the two.
They're just, they got to save on voice actor budget. You got to double some people up.
Yes. Speaking of the voice cast, I certainly think that they really hit it out of the park with this one.
Yeah.
I think so too, but then like I don't speak Japanese, and I like every time I
Right.
watch like a subtitled show, I'm like, wow, these voices are incredible, and then it's like maybe it's just because I don't speak the language.
Yeah. Whatever the case, the emotion definitely comes through, especially in scenes of heightened emotion. Like, for example, in some of the bigger fights, there's a lot of screaming, and they certainly do scream very effectively. Except, of course, for Rey. Rey's not much of a screaming person.
I think it's a shame that I don't speak Japanese because I watched a little of the English dub and I couldn't stand it because the voices were all wrong, because they were different people, obviously. But it did make some of the scenes oddly more engaging because I didn't have to read the subtitles. And I could just look at the frozen image that was up on the screen for the whole minute while the voices were going on. I thought, this is the intended experience. It's a shame that half of these guys sound like idiots in this version.
Yes, that was definitely of a time when high quality dubs were a bit few and far between. Not sure as to exactly when Funimation first got started, but obviously there was a time when just dubbing and localization were very low priority in general.
When will we get to see the 4Kids dub of Evangelion? That's what I want to know.
Well, perhaps you can add it in the links to this episode, but do have a version of the opening of Evangelion as it would have been done by 4Kids.
Nice.
It was something like, Shinji is a boy in his early teens, living in the sunken city of New Orleans.
This is why you're the crooner.
Yeah, this is why we
Naturally.
pay you the big bucks.
Yes.
You hit
I
that
am
out
to
of the park,
please.
man. Yeah. That episode where Shinji's robot goes ape and starts eating the other robot. I thought that was a really exciting episode, and I was sort of disappointed when next episode they just were like, "Yep, we recovered the robot. It's back here in storage. Now we're trying to get Shinji out of it because he dissolved."
Catatonic again.
Yep. Really, everybody says get in the robot, Shinji. Really, the whole show's like get out of the robot, Shinji. Oh no, he's stuck in the robot again. Oh,
It's very deep.
true. Very deep.
Yes, it's all about how deep they can insert that plug into the robot, which I'm sure that's a metaphor for nothing at all, just meant to
No.
be an utterly surface level thing.
Everything in Evangelion just means exactly what it's stated to mean, and nothing more.
Yes, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, sometimes
Yes.
a halo is just a halo.
Luckily, I feel like they explicitly mention the symbolic meanings of about half of the things in Evangelion, so you're covered there.
Yeah, they're usually named after it. You don't have to
Yeah.
look very far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of concepts that you generally have to look up if they're a little bit more esoteric terms taken from Judeo-Christian mysticism, some of which
Ooh.
is properly textual, some of which not so much. They certainly have the certain symbols that they really love to spam all over the place. Don't know exactly what dynamics create those cross-shaped explosions.
Just suffering or something.
I think that's like the beauty of a lot of these symbols is that they can mean so many different things. And even if the people using the symbols, they might not be so up on the specifics of Judaism or whatever, but just by just sticking the imagery in there, it just kind of works. Like just everything seems to fit. You can read into as many. There's all sorts of different kind of religious interpretations of the show, and they're all mutually contradictory, and they're all internally consistent, and it just kind of makes for this kind of like a wonderful assault on the senses, where every image is just littered with you don't know what the hell is going on, but it's supposed to mean something, but you don't know what, but you feel something, and it's sort of unique in that sense.
I think I fully agree with that, and that's what I was feeling. That's what I was trying to describe earlier when I was thinking about the robots and their special properties, because they just have a lot of this crazy stuff going on that maybe is symbolic in some way, but certainly feels very, very interesting while it's going on.
I feel like the parts of the show that resonated with me the most, or at the very least are the most memorable, are when everything suddenly stops. Like Shinji's just been devoured by a giant Dirac and is now
Yeah.
either hallucinating or communicating with something. Now he's seeing himself in a train. You hear the train, what was it? The crossing guard alarm get distorted as it goes by in the Doppler effect, just as he grapples with questions like, is the Shinji Ikari that I perceive the real me, or are there other Shinji Ikaris that exist in the minds of other people who are all as real as the me that I perceive? And also, well, of course, what does it mean to pilot Ava? Do you do it for personal satisfaction? Do you do it for the approval of others? Do you do it to make the world a better place? Are you making the world a better place after all?
It's kind of a question with limited applicability to the audience. Why do you pilot the Ava? Because we don't get to pilot Ava. So who am I to say what the proper motivation to pilot an Ava is?
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's kind of a shallow show.
It's mostly about the psychological repercussions of something that could never happen. So, complete waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely aspects of the show that hit a lot closer to home, like the whole having a distant father thing, who prefers not to live with you and instead spend all of his time uh, entwining his fingers across his mouth and
Mm,
lurking behind his shiny glasses to conceal his eyes.
yeah, that was he's a very strange character, Gendo.
Is Gendo sexy?
I have to. Well, canonically, yes. He's had at least 3 lovers I can recall off the top of my head from the show.
Honestly, can't really say what they see in him.
No, I guess it's because he's so distant. He's basically like, a PUA kind of a guy, and he's spiritually negging them just by existing, I suppose.
Is that why Shinji gets scrolls?
It could be.
Don't know. Don't know.
I recall that, when I was reading Japanese novel No Longer Human, the viewpoint character describes that from a very young age, others could instinctively tell that he was damaged some way and had something to hide, that quality by itself made him extremely popular with the ladies. Not that
Wow.
it really helped his own sense of self any. But yeah, you could say perhaps the best girl was the friends that you made along the way.
Yep. Yep. I think all of the girls in the show practically were friends Shinji made along the way. So it's pretty much impossible for there to be any other one. Your statement is analytically correct.
Yes. But speaking of best girls, we can't deny that a large part of why Evangelion survives in the minds of viewers and fans all these decades later are the character archetypes that it at least helped popularize, and the very distinct characters that endless generations of fans battle over which of them should end up with Shinji, or which of them should end up with them, the viewer.
So there is something that kind of confuses me, which is like Rei is kind of like a clone of Shinji's mom, so it would not be kosher to ship the 2 of them, is my understanding. But of course, as the viewer, your mom isn't Shinji's mom, so you can think whoever you want is the best girl.
I think maybe it's like the Lacanian conception of the objet petit a, that from your earliest memory, you have a sense of something that you've lost and that you might spend your entire life seeking after that sense of a lost object, trying to get it back. And for Shinji, what he had lost was his mother. And what he saw in Rei was, of course, his lost mother.
Wow.
Well, I think this show's kind of clear, or not clear, but I think there's the Oedipal complex is, it seems very intentional, at least
Right.
Like the way the plot resolves is he's sort of like the end of the movie, he basically not that he rejects Ray, but sort of, it's like he returns to the womb in this, big goo thing with this like clone of his mom, and then they just dissolve into one person, and they're just kind of there together.
He also kills his father, so
He does kill his father. Yes. Yeah. Oh wow.
extra
Yes.
Oedipal points.
Well,
Definitely.
technically the Ava does. But I
True.
guess that was controlled by Ray, but that's also his mom. But anyway, there's an incestuous dynamic here, and ultimately at the end, he does reject it to go be with the actual best girl and choke her.
Yeah.
And that was good. That was good for him. That was a sign of growth.
Yes.
It's interesting as to the ways that Asuka is very similar to Shinji while also being very different. For example, she doesn't exactly have an Electra complex to match Shinji's Oedipal complex, but she definitely does have the parental issues that the entire cast deals with in one way or another.
She does lust over an older man. Like Kaji.
Yeah, I suppose
this.
Kaji was her father figure.
Yeah,
but she does still have an actual father out there somewhere who just isn't really important to the story.
I think it's pretty clear that whoever wrote this story had read some Freud and was like, yes, this is the key to human psychology. And when you're using Freud as an ingredient, you get to play really fast and loose with like who is related to whom and how in your interpretations. Is my interpretation of that interpretation. Don't really have anything more to say about that because I don't really believe in Freud. Although I do think when artists have like a big idea that they believe in, and then they make some art that incorporates that big idea, I think usually that kind of makes their art more interesting, even if the big idea is like completely false, because it lets them put in more symbols and things that happen that are significant to them at least.
Yeah, that's something that bothers me about like art interpretations in general. But Ava too. Almost every Ava analysis I see kind of falls in this failure mode where they'll take themes from the show and then they will link them to some kind of existing concept in philosophy or psychology or Judaism or whatever. And in doing so, they really obscure more than they clarify, like because they just stop there. They say, okay, well, this means this according to this theory, and then we can move on to something else. And then you just have this flash of, oh yeah, these things are connected. Cool. I get the reference, but there ends up being nothing there.
The Lance of Longinus, got it. Nice.
Yeah, you really have to engage with the themes. I think I like for that example, you have to think, it's a penis, and it's also the thing that stabs Jesus, and it also sounds like a vagina, and then you, the viewer, have to do the work of figuring out what that means yourself without trying to plug it into so many externals.
Well, what does it mean then?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think the lance even made much sense throughout. Like it really just seems shoehorned in. Like they just thought it would be cool to have, and like somebody had concept art for it. But I don't know that it ever adds anything. I like the part where it turns into a giant tree.
Yes, it definitely was. Convenient for the plot, even if the lore never comes into all that much focus.
I don't know if it was convenient for the plot because they use it like once, and then it's kind of revealed that whose plan was it? Like maybe it was Gendo's plan, or possibly Seela's plan was just like they wanted to throw it away and make it be near the moon so that it wouldn't be around anymore. So sort of just seemed like a speed bump, a very cool speed bump.
Yes, and yet ultimately it seemed not to matter quite as much, since it seems like along with all those artificial Avas, it's also pretty easy to mass produce artificial lances of Longinus.
Yeah, I don't think they had all the spooky powers of the Lance of Longinus that came in.
Maybe it was more focused around being really sharp and stabby then.
Yeah.
Well, they could also do the spooky Kabbalah ritual thing, and they could all stab themselves. It all seemed to work out.
Yes, to
Mhm.
form the Path of Sephiroth, which another piece of, I believe, Kabbalism that makes a very distinct image to show in the show. Not
Yeah.
to be not to be confused with the Final Fantasy character, of course.
No, of course not.
That wouldn't
How?
even be around for a couple more years.
I do think it's interesting that those images show up in a lot of Japanese media, like especially in the '90s. Like you see that kind of stuff in like pretty much every JRPG. It's like you kill God, and then there's a bunch of just like random Christian, Jewish occult things that don't really make any sense. Or I don't know. I think I'm thinking of like Full Metal Alchemist. They have like a Kabbalah tree of knowledge thing that's featured pretty regularly, and like I know that Japan had like a weird Carl Jung like craze like in the early '90s. For some reason, that became popular there, but I'm not sure why that it's like in so many animes.
Yeah, it seems to be still around to some extent, but you're right. It was definitely especially prominent, seemingly in the mid '90s. You get a lot of media that seems to be predicated around some form of psychoanalysis. Could be Freudian, could be Jungian. Occasionally, even get things that are like Lacanian.
When I was watching Evangelion, I thought a lot about Adlerian psychology. Oddly enough, because I read a Japanese self-help book that was about Adlerian psychology, and it's kind of like Freudian psychology, but has a bunch of different recommendations.
What sort of recommendations?
Well, one thing that stuck with me and that I thought about, the famous ending of Evangelion, not the end of Evangelion, but the ending of the television show, where everybody says congratulations to Shinji and claps, which, by the way, I think is a fantastic ending to the television show, legitimately, even though I find those two episodes pretty boring and repetitive until they get to that ending. And
Yes,
then I
I
think,
agree.
well, that was a fantastic ending. He really figured it out. Anyhow, I was reminded of the peculiar edict of Adlerian psychology, where part of the idea of Adlerian psychology is apparently that you feel like you're. Oh no, I'm going to butcher it. So instead, I'll just say the specific thing, which is the idea that when you're raising your child, you don't want to like praise your child if they do something for you. You want to thank them for doing something for you, and that's supposed to treat your child as like having the ability to form their own value system. And so instead of trying to enforce your value system on them by telling them what's good and bad, you just thank them because that's what you would do to somebody who like did you a favor if you saw them as an equal. And I thought that was kind of ridiculous because they're pretty much analytically equivalent. Like if I said to you, "Oh, that was good," or if I said to you, "Oh, thank you," most people would take that the same way. Especially if I said, "Oh, that was good, thank you." Um,
It does remind me a bit of the whole, what was it, growth versus fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I would be at the very least skeptical that of seeing major effects from small scale interventions like that, but it is at the very least interesting food for thought.
I mean, it's hard to watch a whole show that's like predicated on like fairly specific psycho jargon and like, some, theories about childhood development and this and that. And like, but like to watch the show as just a deeply skeptical, like just rationalist, just like, you're just like, oh yeah, this is all bullshit. None of this replicated, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I mean, you can hear Shinji talking about loving himself and like, there's a part of me that goes like, well, that's like not how psychology works. That's not even like a coherent concept. But like on the other hand, like I feel like I can relate very deeply to just the scene in general, the thrust of the show. His smile always gets me emotional, and there's something it works so well that it pushes past that kind of autistic cynicism, and it goes into your heart.
If I could comment on a way that I think my autistic cynicism dismantles my autistic cynicism when I'm watching Evangelion. Like, well, at least when I originally watched the series, Shinji kills the final angel who wants him to kill him. And then it's established vaguely that this will trigger the third impact and the human instrumentality project. And then we have 2 episodes of Shinji being in some sort of weird dream where everybody's getting together and initiating the human instrumentality project. And we're all using each other to fill the holes in our hearts and whatnot. And, even though I think that's kind of fake, in real life, hey, he just killed an angel and ended the world. Maybe we all get to go together and merge into one and really explore that concept.
Now you say that it's fake, but really, is it fake and gay?
No, he just killed the gay character, thus allowing it to be fake and straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Quite a lot of it comes back to the show's recurrent theme of self-loathing and the extent to which people seek validation from others to feel all right about themselves.
Yeah, that's what I was actually trying to get to with my explanation of Adlerian psychology, where in Adlerian psychology, you're not supposed to do that. But then also you end up like caring for people anyway. So it all works out in the end. Yeah.
Personally, one of the most impactful lines in the whole series plus movie, I guess, would be at the start of the scene involving the song Comme Sucetod, Come Sweet Death, the soundtrack of the third impact. Shinji is sort of going on a sort of self-derogatory and or angry tirade. Nobody wants me, so they should all just die. Maybe it would be better if I weren't here. And all throughout that, Ray is seemingly gently questioning his assumptions there. Like, nobody wants me, so they should all just die. Then what is your hand for? Maybe it would be better if I didn't exist myself. Then what is your heart for? And then he finally asks, is it okay for me to be here? And then they just show on the screen the kanji for silence. That essentially, no matter what he wants, he can't receive validation for his own existence from somebody else. It has to come from himself.
Yeah. You've also caused me to remember that in the congratulations ending, Shinji's parents are there, and they're the 2 people who do not clap for him and say congratulations. They just kind of smile at him.
Maybe it's just that Shinji couldn't conceive of his father doing anything with his hands besides sort of tenting them in front of his face.
Well, he's not doing that in the scene. He's sort of holding them by his side or behind him or something.
Yeah, it's sweet.
That takes on a whole new weird context with the movie, where I guess maybe they're doing that because they're both dead.
Dead and in some indeterminate state between life and death.
It's not them so much as his image of them, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That I feel is what introduces a whole lot of the ambiguity debate fodder in the show, is the question of when this character shows up, is it really them who's there, or is it just Shinji's mental image of them?
I think that's more of a philosophical question than it is like a show question, because then it would depend on like how you conceive of other people and how real you think they are.
Mm-hmm. For example, let's see, when Shinji is forced to imagine himself in, I think the living room, having that rather abusive conversation with Asuka, at which she really deeply excoriates him. There's the question as to, would the real Asuka be doing it quite that candidly, or is this just Shinji's imagination of what Asuka thinks of him, or could it be both?
There was a weird line in the final 2 episodes of the original TV series where it's established that like the idea of Shinji in Misato's mind is talking to the idea of Misato in Shinji's mind. They just say that in some dialogue, which seems like it would be the opposite of the human instrumentality project to me. But I'm no humanologist, so maybe that's the right way for it to go. But it seems like you would squish everybody together, and then everybody's like, you would break through the fact that you can only have ideas of other people in your mind, unless you're, Bishop Berkeley or something, as or you are as Jason once said recently, you come to the sort of idealist position where you actually perceive actual people's souls when you look in their eyes.
It's idealist eliminativism. I don't buy it, but I'm going to start.
Right.
I'm going to flesh it out in the mod to piss people off. I think it'd be funny.
I think that's exactly the sort of thing where like I kind of don't buy it in real life, but hey, if you're killing angels, anything could happen, If we establish that somehow in Evangelion there are like souls and you can use them to power robots, why not? Why not? You can look at people in their eyes and see their souls.
There's something about the human instrumentality project. I think that like it cuts to something very deep. I think, at least for me, and maybe I read in all of my own like.
Don't worry, I'm reading them in too from my own.
Yeah, but like it's the idea that we're all going to like come together and merge into one. Like it's not just a kind of like on a personal level. Like yeah, sure, it's like people get lonely or whatever. We're all Sonic the Hedgehog. We poke each other and it solves that problem. But it seems like society has I think kind of in the West a Christian eschatology has morphed into kind of these various secular substitutes for just a heaven where we're all together and fire drunk, and that's taken on different forms in terms of communitarianism or but it's fundamentally it's different gigantic like how to bring people together at scale while at the same time over the centuries technology drives us all apart, and then those two kind of come together is that we end up in this atomized lonely world where everybody's isolated and retreated, but then we're all hooked in by the computer. Yes. The words have symbolism too. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but how do you guys see human instrumentality in kind of wider terms?
Found it an interesting concept. But you covered a lot of, I feel, the show's themes that definitely make that state particularly meaningful. That definitely like a central theme of the show is the difficulty of really and truly understanding another person. That
right.
Even no matter how close you may get to them, there's still always the fact that you are separate people that will leave some kind of gap between you, and that also, as they mention in the Hedgehog's Dilemma, that to be close is to wound somebody else, or at the very least to offer yourself up to their own sharp quills in a way. But you can only make so many Sonic the Hedgehog original characters, and yet we have the internet that we do today.
One thing I want to point out, even though it's not important, is that my understanding is that that's completely fake and not real for hedgehogs, and they can totally get close to each other and not quill each other. And you can even pet a hedgehog if you'd like.
Yes, and I have. They'll sometimes fluff up their quills, but hedgehogs don't actually have barbs that can stick into each other. That's just porcupines.
No. Wait, do you mean the things from Sonic? What are you talking about?
Okay, so imagine the thing from Sonic, but it's like way smaller and slower.
So like tiny Knuckles?
Yeah, basically. Not as strong though. Also, they can't talk.
Do they rap?
No. I don't speak hedgehog, but I don't think they rap either.
Well, Knuckles isn't a hedgehog. Knuckles is an echidna.
Of course.
He also guards the Master Emerald.
Yes. Which so I've never read any existentialists, but I'm told from trusted authorities that one of the main themes of existentialism is that you're always going to be alone. You can't ever truly know another person, and I think that that's very reflected in Evangelion as well. And people don't like this. They're like, oh, I wish I could know other people. I have this feeling in my heart.
The various nebulous organizations that see instrumentality as humanity fulfilling its purpose, ascending to its next form, attaining an existence equivalent to the angels.
I wonder if instrumentality, like when we think of using humans as an instrument, we typically think like that's bad and wrong. Like Kant would say, you're not supposed to use other people as a means to an end because they are ends in themselves. So I wonder if that name is like purposefully supposed to be ironic in a sense, that all these people, like, we're going to use all the other people in the world to fill the hole in our heart. But that's not actually a good thing.
Well, I think there's different, because and correct with Sultan, I think you'd know better, but I think there's some kind of implication, and I think I'm firmly in the right to say that the show like is not remotely clear about this, and it's like rather ambiguous. But it seems to be that there's different things that could be accomplished in human instrumentality. It's like, yes, everybody's merged together, but you're also creating this this godlike being by turning all of humanity to Tang and then merging it together. It's that we all become this god thing, and so I took the name to be like not individual humans, but like humanity is now it's instrumental to become this this god.
Yes, it's a god that takes the form of a Tang-soaked earth, with a giant naked girl sprouting out of it.
Maybe I was reading it wrong, like the visual metaphor or what have you, but I was kind of disappointed in the end that like it seemed that we were creating a real physical and angelic godlike being at the end of Evangelion, when we were all merging into one. When I thought it should have been a lot more abstract and kind of more like episodes 25 and 26 of the original series. Except I didn't particularly like those episodes, but the idea seemed to be
I think that there was
preferable to me.
There was perhaps a real appetite to have something more tangible to the ending, in along with all of the seeming attempts of the end to sort of address the disappointment that people might have had with the final two broadcast episodes. You can't get too much more stark than an ocean of, well, I would say either Tang or Soylent Orange, depending.
Craving the abstraction to me sounds very Protestant, and I mean that in the worst way. Like I think there's an intentional juxtaposition, I think, between how internal and abstract the the ending of the show is, and then how I mean the movie's ending is abstract too, but it's like, okay, here's what physically, literally happened, right?
Right.
But I think, and I doubt the show's. I doubt they intended this at all, but here's like my reading of it is that a lot of the sort of sense of loneliness and atomization and, the, let's say, inability to connect with other people, philosophically, I think that comes from a kind of, that comes from like dualism, and it comes from kind of modern philosophy. It starts with, okay, let's throw everything we know out and start with, I think, therefore I am. And then, immediately you create this kind of artificial distinction between subject and object, which is so deep it's written into like every sentence and every proposition we utter. But I think this ultimately, if you read existentialists, or at least Heidegger and other people preclude him, they would say that no, this is just a kind of a natural confusion that has arisen because of the way language works and the way culture has evolved. But in reality, the a subject is unintelligible except as a part of a world, and a world is only intelligible as, a thing or a kind of a person meaningfully inhabiting it. And all things in the world are not things in and of themselves, but they're in this big chain of meaning, so that everything always is connected and is only intelligible as itself, as a connected entity, which sounds very abstract, but it sort of resolves like the theme of the show, and it's almost like not so much human instrumentality, but as you start to think in those terms, you sort of see that, yes, my life has meaning. I'm going to die. I have to accept that. I have to take responsibility for what's going to happen, and I have to care for myself and the people around me. And in some sense, I am profoundly alone, but in another sense, I am profoundly social and always with others and always caring with others. And I must accept that to live. And I think the show, I mean, that's so like vague. It's like, it's really easy to say like, oh yeah, here's this vague message, and the show is confusing and it vaguely means this, but these things overlap. But at least the way I kind of see the juxtaposition of, because you have two endings and they're both supposed to be quote unquote the same event, but they're wildly different. But in a sense, one is let's say subject and object, or the one is kind of abstraction, metaphysical, and one is more material, but the two kind of come together into one, which is also what a crucifixion symbolizes. And what like my other galaxy brain take is that the structure of Evangelion, or end of Evangelion, is just like a passion play. It's kind of, here's just these things leading up to the crucifixion, or at least the second part. But there's very much this duality, that this coming together of all things. And I think the stark difference between the giant cat girl / boy monster tank thing and the fucking Lacanian, psycho session with the little distorted bad art and the schoolgirl high school scene. Those two things, like the claim is that these are the same thing. These are coming together, and yet like they couldn't be any further apart. And I think there's something very, very beautiful and very true in that, as we struggle to bring them together.
Yeah, I think that they definitely share some themes in common, especially when taken as the idea of one ending is sort of what is happening outside of Shinji, and one is Shinji's, how he feels, or how it feels to him to experience that. And I certainly felt that there were some of the strongest thematic overlap. The idea introduced at the end that freedom comes with its own set of limitations, that when Shinji is set absolutely free of existence, then he finds that he's just floating in a featureless void, and I guess could theoretically do anything, but has no real structure or guidance as to what to do. And they draw a horizontal line to delineate the sky and the earth, and now he has some sort of guiding structure, but his freedom has been reduced correspondingly. I feel like that definitely seems to resonate with the idea of that a freedom from the idea of the individual, from dealing with other people as individuals, sets you free of so much of the obligations of life, and yet you have no sort of structure to guide you in your interactions, without a real concept of the other to delineate from yourself.
What a great use of animation that was, especially when they're like running out of time. It took like they're like just they like actually very meta. They had a very specific constraint on the show and what they could produce, and it's like, yeah, we can only afford shitty animation. And then they just ran with it, and they made one of the best sequences in the whole show out of it. It's just gorgeous.
I connected the freedom and limitation things a lot to the will to live, which I think a couple of characters, most notably towards the end, Misato mentions like very explicitly, humans have the will to live, and that's why we're going to keep surviving, because we got the will to live and they don't. So that's why we're going to fight for things. And one of the things about being alive, being a living creature, is you got to keep you got to have a distinction between the inside and the outside of you, and you got to keep the inside things in you and the outside things out of you. So that directly comes back at the end when I forget how it's established, but it's established that anyone who had the will to live can return from the Tang and become a human again.
Find it interesting that you bring up the concept of the will to live and just how that was what set humanity apart from the angels. Suppose one thing that we've been dancing around is the character of Kaoru, exactly how he provides a contrast to basically every other character in the show up to that point. And I guess he's our clearest glimpse of the actual psychology of the angels, the extent they have a recognizable psychology that he, in contrast to everybody who feels so hemmed in, he's just this completely unabashed, offering unconditional love to Shinji and seemingly by extent to all mankind that he finds that the music that they've created to be the greatest, to be their greatest invention, and offers his own life so that mankind might live, so that mankind might not perish, but should receive eternal instrumentality.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. There's an idea. There's a really good video on YouTube. It's just like this hour-long like schizophrenic Ava analysis, which like there's lots of them, but this one specifically, it's like so rapid fire. Like it's just like it cuts to a different scene like every like second or two, and every scene it has like just like it's just like coming at you at like lightning speed, and so it kind of feels like I don't know. It's almost like watching like Nick Land Meltdown or something, or like or almost like the opening of the show. Like it's really an experience into itself, and I'd like to link it. But it makes this point about how, which I don't even know if this fits like the explicit lore of the angels, but it's like as each angel comes, like they kind of start really stupid, and then they kind of get more and more psychologically developed. And not just like at first like they're kind of developing in certain ways, and maybe it parallels like Freudian child development or something like that. But they start to take an interest in humanity. They start to want to like know what's going on, and that's Shinji's getting sucked into the egg thing, and then they have that ASUKA gets her like alien mind probe rape thing. These things keep happening, and each time, the angels just seem to be getting more and more curious about the psychology of these kids. And so the final angel, when he comes, it's, okay, so they've reached out to humanity and they keep coming and they're developing, very quickly. And, and finally in their maturity, they have totally fallen in love with us, or at least Shinji, that's what the angels came to do.
I think, I'm not really sure about this, but I think somewhere in the series is the implication that like Sela, the organization, thinks that humanity is a mistake, and because of we're not to get into how all the angels are actually aliens, which is I found that a little bit disappointing, but I guess all right,
Yeah, but I don't think they ever actually spell that out in the show itself.
No.
It kind of seems to be the thing that you've got to look into supplementary materials to really piece together.
Another one of the good takes from that video is that everybody's so like dependent on technology and like divorced from just like the spiritual or like how they would understand like each other, that they mistake aliens. Like the first aliens come and they're like, oh my God, these must be angels, because they're just so out of touch with like, I guess that side of themselves that they just can't tell the difference.
Mm-hmm. So anyhow, I believe that Sela believes that humanity is the mistake, and they're somehow in their machinations going to rectify that mistake, and all the humans are going to die, and it's going to be angel time, baby. But I guess they want to do that in a way that's different than just letting the angels do whatever it is the angels were coming around to do to destroy humanity. They want to destroy humanity in a more kino, sophisticated way. So that forms an interesting contrast with the angels who come and they look at humanity and they're like, actually, you guys rock. You guys are great. You are the happy little tree of the accident of God's mistake. I guess I should say that we're talking a lot about the meanings of certain things, but I don't actually think the meanings are really the most important part of anything. It's kind of the feeling that the meanings create while you're watching them, or
Yes.
the what can I say, the light brush of implications of the meanings as they go by, and you see the AT field, and it's called an absolute terror field, and you're like, whoa, that's a really cool name for a field. And then later an angel guy says, the AT field is the field that surrounds your very inner soul, and that's what it is. It's like, wow, the force field was around our souls, and that connection is very pleasing to make in a way that isn't particularly tied to any sort of meaning or claim about anything.
Yes.
At
And
least
the
in my
idea
case.
that, essentially instrumentality would represent the elimination of the force fields around the human heart.
Right.
And humans would cease to be separate beings. It would become a puddle of tang.
Yeah.
I just have to disagree with you there. Is that I think
Okay.
obviously, very obviously, if when you have this name for the AT field, it's this techno jargon, whatever the fuck it is, and they talk to the angel, and the angel's like, "Oh yeah, this is like that sacred place where none may dwell." And then all of a sudden, it's like, "Oh shit, these two things are the same thing." That's heaven and earth touching, which is the core theme of the show.
I find it interesting as to how the proper full elaboration of AT field. I don't think it's ever spoken out loud by any character in the story. It's just flashed at you as part of the second half of the intro when all the characters and concepts seem to be flashing at rapid fire on the screen. The music is building to a crescendo.
That's probably my favorite part of the whole series, honestly. It's just that little bit of the opening.
What I've said is, regardless of whether it's your favorite anime opening or not, it is probably the most iconic opening anime, to the extent that when people want to do a parody anime opening, it will, without fail, be that one.
Well, there's something in anime openings that I really like. And I don't know if like Evangelion invented this. Like I think it takes a lot of the tropes. I guess maybe like it popularized the rapid fire thing. But I think something about it is maybe getting back to that thing about how like meanings are less important than just like that kind of feeling of like the web of associations like going off, like just firing all at once, and just that that like there's something kind of hard to grasp there, but that's the way we experience things on just like a moment to moment basis, and kind of like talking about them and deconstructing them is very much to like kind of to pause things and to kind of degrade things and pick them apart into like a form we can understand and converse with each other. Whereas the anime opening can like just it can say so much more just by flashing everything of just like, oh yeah, here's all the characters and here's some music and here's them looking for each other and here's the hero and here's the villain, and then here's just fucking like AT field, naked girl, giant robot, fucking gibberish. It just goes like rapid fire, bing, 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 and you just like I don't know, something like that. I feel like that's almost like an accurate depiction of like the way our memories work, or the way of just like what it is to look at something.
You're on a good point there, because it seems like quite a lot of the most memorable scenes in the series tend to be sort of so many different layers of stimulus that you can't really properly disentangle them all. You just got to sort of experience it. Like you've got people throwing these difficult concepts and themes at you, whilst occasionally you'll see like montages of very flashy action sequences and or sort of music, especially the music where the lyrics are in some way dissonant with the melody. Like, of course, the song "Comme Susa Tod," "Come Sweet Death." It's like you listen to just the melody. It's this Hey Jude-esque piano theme with a very happy sounding singer. You listen to the words. It's like, in my heart of hearts, I know that I can never love again. I've lost everything. Everything that matters to me matters in this world. Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't the only piece of media to work in that sort of thing. To be hard pressed to name iconic.
I thought it was I've listened to Comme Susa Todd a lot just as a song that was recommended to me previously, and I thought, wow, this is a really good song. And then I thought it was actually I thought the placement in the anime was kind of weird, and like it was sort of buried under a bunch of other characters saying things, whereas I thought, I don't know, maybe it would be a poor choice in retrospect, but I sort of thought it would just that song would play, and then we would maybe see some images and reflect on the song as it was happening in the series or in the movie.
Find it interesting as to, well, how it's the sort of thing that is sort of subtly in the background. Like, I had not heard it prior to watching End of Evangelion the first time. I certainly listened to it on my own quite a bit afterwards, because I was a miserable teenager at the time, and of course, I think it's going to resonate with a lot of miserable teenagers. But it's interesting as to the lyrics not immediately being obvious, even that it's in English. I think it's the only song with English lyrics in the soundtrack to the whole series.
Yeah.
I guess it's like his direct sin, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily feel that it was ill-fitting for the scene itself, insofar as there is that complicated and occasionally dissonant layered emotions in the song itself. It's mixed with the very oddly layered emotions of the actual process. That it, on the one hand, you've got the sort of despair and fear that they've failed in the worst possible way, and now everything that they were trying to prevent at Nerve, it was all for naught. And not only that, they're about to be subsumed into this great massive aggregated humanity. And on the other hand, there's this weird sense of joy, especially since like the method of turning people into Tang was to appear as somebody that they most loved or trusted. And then, well, actually, as they smile, they suddenly melt into Tang all at once.
Well, you know, Ray's voice actress doesn't scream, but she does do that creepy laugh.
I find it interesting as to the weird sort of very soft, delicate cadence that she maintains through the whole performance. Thing like, Karikin. Best attempt at doing a Ray impression.
Sultan,
Never really does seem to raise her voice, pun not intended.
Were you going to say something about absolute terror before we went on this tangent?
I think what led into it was just my bringing up the fact that it was flashed in the intro sequence. That's sort of, I believe, the only frame of the show where you actually get the proper elaboration absolute terror field. I think whenever it's referred to in the show, it's either just called AT field, or I think they refer to the domain within it to be absolute territory, not to be confused with what that phrase has now come to represent.
All right. And I guess I will go further down the tangent and say that, yeah, I guess I hadn't really put together how the, like when I was watching the scene of everybody getting turned into Tang and becoming one, I was kind of confused as to like, is this supposed to be good or not? Because like various people planned this as, yep, this will be a good idea, and then it happens, and everybody's kind of frightened, but also kind of happy, but mostly frightened. And now that you say it, it's like, oh, of course, that was deliberate, and that's why Shinji later is like, this is kind of what I wanted, but it feels wrong, and so undo that, please. We're getting out of the Tang.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting. I think that was definitely a very intentional reaction. That even when they have that long shot of the entire Earth being swept over with that wave of hang and cross-shaped explosions, that you hear like the screams of all humanity. That apparently the sound mixing on that was screams of terror mixed in with screams of joy.
That's the sign of an effective scene is if you can watch something that horrifying and you're not like immediately thinking like, oh yeah, this is bad. Like you're like, oh, yeah, this might be kind of cool. Like, I mean, there's just this giant lady titty monster where it's like, you're like, I don't know, like those. I mean, he starts off like choking her, and then you get all these just horrible images, and then it goes into those things start crucifying themselves, like while they're laughing, and they just they die, and then you have all the screaming and the die. I mean, it's just not it's objectively horrific, but I think some part of you, or at least me when I watch it, I don't know, I just find the whole thing just to be immensely like, I guess, cathartic. Like it just not that it's something I want to happen, but I'm not like, oh no, this is bad. I'm just like, I'm always just excited to see it every time the movie comes on.
Yeah,
It's just it's so beautiful.
I think even for the characters themselves, it seems like there's a moment in the process at which they feel an immense sense of relief. I think you can see that most clearly with the scene of, I believe her name is Maya, the girl on who's always part of the bridge crew, that she's just curled up in, just sort of in the fetal position by her laptop breaking down, and then she realizes that Ritsuko, her senpai, is behind her. Then she just breaks down in this wash of joy, and then that's when she melts into Tang. And that I think I touched on this even earlier. I think for Shinji, that specific event happened earlier in the process. So that as he's been lifting up, sees the giant naked prey with her hollow eyes, he's absolutely screaming in and just like inconsolable with terror. And then he sees, he hears Kaoru's voice saying something like, "Is this better?" And then he sees that her face has been replaced, her face and upper body has been replaced with Kaoru's, and then he just suddenly is all smiling and says something like, "Kaoru, you were there the whole time?" That perhaps the person that he loved and trusted in that moment was Kaoru.
Yeah, it was a good point. Good point. Does anyone have any idea about the part where Gendo says something and we don't get to hear it, like it's blanked out? It was a weird choice.
His last words to Ritsuko. Is
Yeah.
that right?
I'm gonna get another beer.
Okay.
Yeah, I find that a little bit of an enigma, as with a lot of stuff about Gendo. It certainly seems like a recurrent theme of his character is the various women that he's involved with, who may just be Ritsuko and her mother. I guess he likes him generationally, but them
Well, also
breaking
his
down in
dead
anger
wife.
directed at Ray. Yeah. Then breaking down in anger directed at Ray and Yui, or both, from the feeling that they will never measure up to them. So you get that with Ritsuko's mother strangling the original Ray. You get that with Ritsuko turning all of the Rays in the giant fish tank into chum. You get the sense that maybe the dominant character trait for Ritsuko, when you get down to it, is jealousy.
Well, I guess I'd like to run by you an interesting theory I read online and subsequently elaborated on in my own mind, and just get it out there. And the crux of the idea is that Ritsuko is talking to Gendo. He says something like, "Ritsuko, truly I," and then we don't get to hear what he says. And then she calls him a liar, and then he shoots her. And then, so basically in my mind, we have no clues as to what he said, except the next time Ritsuko shows up to turn her subordinate into Tang, she types on the computer, "I need you." And that's, at least to my mind, the only possible clue we have. And so I think that might have been what he said.
Possibly, but I feel like that just returns to the question of, was that Ritsuko? Was that just Maya's inner Ritsuko, as opposed to the one that we were seeing for the entire series? Like,
sure.
if you were to take the idea that all the people that the various copies of Rei were transforming into were actually those people, that'd be an interesting take. But it would also say that, like, Misato was secretly in love with Hyuga, the guy with the glasses who works the bridge. That Yui was also in love with Fuyutsuki, the old guy.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I
it's
don't
possible
think
that was all that was in some way the case. But
I don't think it needs to be that straightforward for the theory to hold water.
I mean, I think there's like a thematic connection then, if it's not like a straightforward one. Like,
perhaps
there's definitely something significant.
But my personal read of that scene was simply that she had long harbored a secret crush on Ritsuko, and to have her be embraced by that was just the moment of just euphoria that caused her to turn into Tang.
I think there's something interesting about. I guess this seems like obvious in hindsight, but I guess the the symbolism of like Rei becoming everybody's like ideal waifu, like as they die, because that's very much like what her and I mean a lot of the other characters, or at least all the her and Asuka, Misato, and Kaoru, they're all they're these sort of idealized fantasies, and I mean, like the whole story is almost, it's like, what does a 14-year-old boy want more than anything in the world? Like, what would his fantasy be? It'd be to like be chosen to be like the savior of the world, to like pilot this giant robot, and then be surrounded by these like beautiful women who are like all competing for him. And then here's like this like kind of inverse take on it. And then as the show's progressed, or it's become like a show. Rei doesn't really exist so much as like the entity in the show, as much as she exists as this kind of like porn consumer item for people to like she's an anime body pillow girl for people to project all of their desires onto. Which I didn't know if that has something to do with her being a mother figure or something, but there does seem to be a very explicit theme of escapism and kind of a blurring of that, especially in kind of the scenes after the instrumentality stuff at the end of the movie when they start playing J.C. Joy of Man's Desiring, and they're showing the shots of like real life in the movie theater, and then they start showing. There's a few scenes of the actresses, and I think there's one where it's like they're like turned away from the camera, but they're just wearing like street clothes, but they're the three voice actresses for the girls. And then there's another one where it's like they're facing it, or maybe I have it the other way around. But there's these two juxtaposed shots. One of them where it's like they're dressed as the characters that they voice in the show, and another one where they're not. And then the whole message is about why it was bad for Shinji to retreat to a fantasy world that he constructed in his head. It's all very on the nose.
Right. Yeah. That was something I kind of found odd in the anime, is the emotional arc. It seems like, Shinji's kind of throughout the anime, he's kind of getting better the whole time, and he's like relating to other people more and more. But then at the end, everyone starts getting really stressed out, and it seems like he too starts getting stressed out and reverses that trend.
I think there's definitely a lot of well, things that would seem sort of resonant to anybody who's grappled with either depression or self-loathing, to sort of feel as though you're gradually making progress, but then unexpectedly find yourself just sort of in some deeper circle of hell than before.
Yeah, oftentimes, often when somebody kills themselves, it's when they start feeling better, because before that they were just kind of like too depressed to do anything, like too depressed to get out of bed. And then it's like you start feeling a little better, and it's like, hey, suddenly I can do things. So I better go over to the rickety stool store and get a rope and, write that note. And, otherwise you just put it off for years.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one read of the sort of strange undercurrent of euphoria that runs through the whole third impact. Like, a read of the lyrics of Comme Susur Todd certainly seems as though it has a lot of references to suicidal ideation or something like that.
I like how your
I
voice
mean,
got like subtly deeper as you said, "Come, Sister Todd."
yes, just taking up the German inflection.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, even down to just the title, "Come Sweet Death," that seems to be calling out for the peaceful rest that they would hope that oblivion of some kind would be.
Well, I think I mean my read, of course, is that it's a Christian thing, and the whole idea of like you have a hero's journey, and then at the end, the hero dies and they are resurrected. That's just kind of just basic like Christian story structure. Like every story ever kind of tells that story. I mean, like I guess like Star Wars or something like fucking like Return of the Jedi, or which I say because it's explicitly based on archetypes, but just, that's like a very straightforward story. And it has that same kind of, turn to the darkness as you're getting this progress, and then, this kind of death. And that's where the heroism comes in. And I think that the emotional arc just happens to mirror that. Is I don't know. It's hard to say how intentional it is, because it is kind of like I think I agree with Flashy a bit. Is that like, well, I don't know if you're saying this earlier, but it does seem kind of sloppy. Like, like there is an arc to the character development, but like from one episode to another, it can just be so jarring in how Shinji's feeling after he has all these revelations before, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, here's his mood now, and it's easy to write these things off as like, oh well, he's just a teenager, or we can like read some kind of motivation into it, but it does seem kind of scattered for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think well, probably the reason why probably Shinji's character might be one of the most controversial bits of the show is it depends as to how much of yourself you see in Shinji, and whether the extent of yourself that you see in Shinji is something that you feel any sort of sympathy for, or something that you really find distasteful about yourself.
I think I brought this up to the two of you before, but it's very difficult for me to understand Shinji, because I don't really understand the concept of hating oneself. Although there are many angles where I see it's plausible that one could come to that conclusion. I don't think it's part of my own particular psychological makeup to attribute anything bad in my life to myself inherently. Although I suppose, you could say like, oh, I want to not be a coward, but I am. Ergo, by my own values, I hate myself. That could conceivably happen. So it just seems like an unlikely move for me to make. Probably because my father was not distant, and my mother did not get sucked up into a giant robot.
I would say that I would say that there are definitely aspects of Shinji's experience that I found definitely quite resonant, even if the particulars are completely different. Like he's got to adjust to being in a completely new environment at the start of the series. Like, the only person he knows at all in New Tokyo 3, just Tokyo 3 at the start of the series is his father, and it's hard to say that he really knew him to any worthwhile extent. He's just
Right.
got to adjust to being the new person. In his case, it's not just adjusting to that, but adjusting to the significant responsibility that's just been very curtly thrust upon his shoulders. Like, you
Right.
just arrived. Now you've got to pilot the robot, or else the world will end.
Which I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Just a huge tactical blunder by Gendo there. It's an absolute clown move. Like, you should have at least brought the kid in a week earlier. Tell him.
Fortunately, it seems like they don't really control when the angels show up.
Maybe they read the case against education.
They thought there's no point in teaching him how to pilot the robot. You either got it or you don't.
It's all a matter of signaling anyway.
Yeah.
True. Well, tell you what, you need to use your neurons to signal to the Eva that you'd like to walk around in order to fight the angel. And that was a stumbling block.
Well, that's weird because they have controls in the Ava. Like there's some kind of direct piloting mechanism. They could just be pushing buttons like they do in every other mech show, but somehow they also have to be like psychically linked.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really have that many controls. They have like 2 levers, so...
I think it was either connected to or just very strong foreshadowing that it wasn't really just sort of a direct transmission or any sort of direct mechatronic control system. It was essentially that you could send some sort of stimulus to the fleshy bit of the Ava, but in order to actually have it respond to that stimulus, you had to have that psychic link.
There's
Interesting.
That mind-body problem coming in again, where you have some kind of like a spooky link between the physical and the mental. And there's like a little I forget where he says it. Descartes says it's like there's like some like specific part of the brain where like that's where
Pineal gland.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
My interpretation was completely different. And in fact, I'm kind of mystified by why there are those 2 levers there at all. Because I thought, listen, there's clearly not enough levers for you to control this entire robot body that needs to balance and stuff. I'm just going to mention the word cybernetics, and like the cybernetic control system of just balancing is a remarkably difficult problem if you don't think about it and you think, you just kind of stand there. You need to have...
It may have just been a placebo. I forget if they ever show them when they achieve their highest sync rate actually moving the Evas without grasping those levers. But it certainly seemed as though it may have simply been just something for them to trust would have an effect, whereas the actual thing was that sync rate.
Could be.
Sorry to exit the tangent, but there was something I thought of about the thing you were saying about self-hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Sultan, you were talking about how a lot of Shinji's behavior is like pretty reasonable given the circumstances. Like, I mean, like he actually, like all things considered, he acts relatively, like given a normal 14-year-old boy, he does a lot better than you would expect him to do. Like he's relatively heroic if you excuse a lot of his faults. I
think that Shinji is a lot more mature than just sort of the stereotype of his character would have you believe. It's just that he has limited outlets to deal with sort of an accumulating list of stresses and such. By the end, it becomes quite a lot to bear.
I wonder if there's something that the viewer can learn, because I think and Flashy, I'm sympathetic to your point about self-hatred. I think it does. I think of it as sort of like a confusion of language in some sense, but I also very much do strongly relate to pretty much all of Shinji's issues, and I think there's something in the show that if you kind of interesting, and then I thought, no, he's a coward, he's a failure, and then as you start to see him more optimistically, it's almost like it's almost like you're learning to excuse yourself. Like it's like, okay, well, if I relate to this character, and I think I'm weak and cowardly and shameful and blah blah blah, but then I can still think of them as like doing the right thing given all the circumstances. Then you can apply that to yourself. Which I don't know if that's necessarily intended by this show, but I think of a few other shows, like shows with anti-heroes, like I guess like let's take like Breaking Bad, where it's like there's very much this the writers are trying to see like how far they can push you, and how sympathetic you can be to this character before you yourself feel yourself turning on him, or if you read like Lolita, you're so taken in by the beauty of the prose that you start getting into the mind of a pedophile, and then you start having kind of these moral qualms about it. And through grappling with that, it's supposedly you can learn something about yourself. I'm skeptical of that, but I think to any degree that those other shows and books are successful at that, I think Ava would be too.
It's interesting. When I was watching Ava, I thought Shinji was actually, quite conventionally heroic in the sense of, he does get in the robot. Basically, every time he tries to refuse to get in the robot is because Gendo is just being possibly Gendo is playing some sort of 4D chess, but on the ground it looks like he's just being a huge jerk to his son for no reason and being very irrational. The two times that come to mind are one in the beginning where he says, well, we have about 1 minute before an alien destroys us all. You have zero training. I want you to get into this highly complicated war machine. Just do it because I told you to. I'm not going to apologize or explain. You just do it now. And the second time being when he goes in for the kill on Shinji's friend, when he could have, it seems to be established he could have avoided doing that and just disabled the Ava. And then Shinji says, well, that was, I can't trust you at all. I mean, he doesn't actually say that, but seems to be
Just say you betrayed my
subtext.
feelings.
Yeah. So, and then he realizes that actually the angels are going to kill everyone, and that's sort of more important than his weird, distant dad trying to kill individual people every so often. And he goes back.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about, feeling that Shinji was actually something of a fulfillment of the standard heroic narrative. If I had to select one character that I felt was very much like a subversion of that heroic narrative, it would probably actually be ASUKA, who I feel we haven't really talked about very much compared to her role in the story. But like she starts out, she's the hotshot pilot doing the proper production type as opposed to like the test type and prototype. She's supposedly the really skilled pilot that they're bringing in specially from overseas, and yet throughout the series she repeatedly is unable to stand out on her own. She just continually deteriorates in her performance, the extent that like at first she is at the very least a worthy partner for Shinji. By the end she's just sort of like desperately trying to get her unresponsive Ava to move at all. And then of course lying in that bathtub and then going catatonic and all of the stuff that happens after that. But yeah, what I felt was probably the clearest case of that subversion is she has her big moment end of Evangelion. She discovers, Mother, you were with me the whole time. You were in the robot all along. The music is soaring. She's ripping apart all of the test Avas, and then just when it seemed like her moment of triumph, she just gets cut down so cruelly and just humiliatingly in that agonizing defeat. I definitely thought that she was interesting foil to Shinji in that regard, and a lot of other regards as well.
I guess she, if I can go back and mention Adlerian psychology again, which perhaps I'm being a complete rube, and this is all in a more conventional form of psychoanalysis that someone in Japan would be more likely to have read at the time. I think it's established that she's doing things like, well, this also happens to Shinji, but she's doing things like for external validation so that the whole world can see that she's the best one. But this seems to be the wrong reason for you to pilot the Eva, as many characters are asked why they do it. And it also leads to her making like a bunch of stupid mistakes so she can try to establish that she's the best at Eva. And then she makes one mistake, and then she thinks, oh no, now I need to like showboat even harder so I can establish that I am the best at Eva, because the core of my identity is receiving external validation for being the best Eva pilot. And then the crippling series of mistakes end up getting her in the end. Although it is interesting to think about, like, when she has a realization that her mother was with her the whole time, is that still a form of external validation, even though it seems like a heroic realization?
Yeah, I don't like the mother thing, or at least like I can't figure out how to fit it in. I think maybe just because I don't know or care enough about mother complexes, but it's I don't know, and I kind of see the that's not the end of her arc. The end of her arc is at the very, very end when Shinji's choking her, and then she kind of seems to caress his face, and then she calls him disgusting, or however it's supposed to be translated. And you know, that is very much growth for her. Or well, I mean, there's a million different interpretations of it, but it is definitely like her reaction is definitely, at least at first, uncharacteristic, and you know, and even the fact that she's like rejecting instrumentality at all means that, you know, she must have gone through some sort of similar process as Shinji, or you know, and you know, she's kind of died and been reborn actually twice, I guess thematically, maybe 3 times, but yeah, but I mean, it definitely, her, you know, she definitely mirrors Shinji, and she definitely goes to that kind of some sort of personal growth. I don't think it's like all the mother thing, or maybe maybe knowing her mom was there solves all her problems magically, and then that's like her whole arc. But maybe something happens off screen during the instrumentality. You know, who knows?
I was I might be confused in my interpretation of the line "how disgusting," because I thought initially I thought, oh, she's just woken up. She hasn't been around at all since she was like conked out in the hospital, and Shinji masturbated at her. And she's just like, she's now re-entered the narrative and is reacting to that last event. But maybe somewhere in the spirit world, she saw Shinji do that in his idea of her idea of him or something, and then she was like, "Got to react to that one now that I've woken up."
Yeah, it's definitely possible, especially in terms of like the production story behind the scenes. Ano, the director, was essentially trying to figure out how to make that last scene work, and that he just settled on the line on asking the voice actress for ASUKA what her response would be. Well, should she have experienced like somebody breaking into her room, masturbating over her while she slept? And I think that specific phrase can be translated in like a lot of different ways. It can be like, I feel sick, or like, I've got the creeps, or just something
now that you mention it, I think like maybe it's supposed to be understood more on a symbolic level, like the scene of Shinji choking the life out of her or into her, maybe while she's unconscious-ish, and then she wakes up to it, is just supposed to thematically parallel the scene where Shinji is masturbating to her while she's unconscious.
Yeah, I think there's some obvious there's some obvious thematic parallels there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the start and end of the movie. But
if I were to get especially Freudian, I would say I think what he wrote was that urge the urge towards life was embodied in the libido. I
Mm,
think the literal translation of libido is life force, and that it had the parallel in the urge to death, the destrudo.
mm,
I think that's one of those terms that comes up mentioned at random by one of the characters in one of the episodes, but I forget exactly in what context it comes up. Possibly when Shinji is dissolved into the Eva, but yeah, I found that like the thematic parallel there was you've got an active libido at the start, what seems to be an active destrudo at the end.
mm.
yeah, I mean that seems to be like kind of like all over the show, like not just there, but even the one that keeps coming like to mind is kind of how the getting in the Ava is it's very much like a return to the womb.
Right.
And that stuff that they're filled up with, it has this
Yeah, LCL.
fetal, and
Embryonic
then
fluid.
yeah, and they're often in like the fetal position, especially Ray. But that kind of
The
goes on.
cord is called the umbilical cord.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the
They're
little
inserted by a large rod, all sorts of things.
right, the rod is it's a dick,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the lances are dicks. Shinji Wande Bang. It's very much kind of this both like this return to the womb thing that's overlapping with
Red Bone.
sex,
Yeah.
and that's also sex with your mom, but it's also sex with like any other girl that you're projecting your mom onto, and all these things are just always like just just symbolically, at least on a thematic level, the images are always coming together at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. There's like some specific meaning to it, but the show just kind of revels in it.
True. There's also a lot of in that romance that we mostly see in flashback between the two characters who I forget the name of, even though we've been talking about one of them.
Misato and Kaji.
Yes, I was just going to remark how their relationship. There's a lot of Misato saying like, he really reminded me of my father. How how Freudian, which was germane then.
The thing I found interesting about that subplot that I hadn't picked up on at all the first time I saw this was like the very end. Shinji sees like a glimpse of Misato being intimate with Kaji, and he's just sort of instantly says something like, "I don't want to see this side of you, Misato-san."
Mm,
Like I don't want to think of you in this way. It's hard to say as to whether that was just sort of like a him going through kind of like a Madonna whore complex with regards to her, because they definitely seem to place her as like an object of his desire, along with Asuka and Rei. Like whenever he's seeing like those idealized female figures, it's always those three: Asuka, Rei, Sato. But he seems to just sort of not be freaked out by it, but just be like mildly disgusted by it upon just like the idea of her being intimate with somebody else that way.
Well, she does come on to him a lot. Like I think, like the three girls, they very much, they're kind of these caricatures for Shinji's sexual proclivities. Um, but it seems like like I think his pathologies emerge more with the other two. But when it comes to Misato, just especially as the show progresses, she just seems to like need to be sexual with him in some ways. Like she can't have like a motherly relationship with him. She has to keep kind of teasing him and trying to kiss him and doing these things. Like that's all she's the one driving it. And it's very much hugely inappropriate. I mean he's a boy. And I don't know like where exactly that scene is, like how late into the series it is that we're talking about, but
I think it's like one of the last two episodes. It's like
oh, okay, yeah.
it's essentially the human instrumentality project is just seeing glimpses of everybody
Yeah,
else.
okay, yeah. I know the one you're talking about. Then, yeah, I mean, like, it seems like there's almost a sense of, well, I guess like another theme of the show is kind of like there's lots of themes in it, I guess, that are like it's kind of it's it's a biblical narrative, and lots of stuff from Genesis comes up. Like, I mean, it's literally in the ending, but what characterizes the fall is, or one of the things is, the nakedness, and that's kind of the the separation between people. It's now there's we're no longer together. We have to have this thing that drives us apart. And you can kind of see that in the AT fields. They're kind of or putting the armor on the Avas. And it seems like there's a sense that she kind of violates that. Like she reveals too much of herself. Like she can't quite connect with anybody, and so to compensate, she just kind of starts showing these sides of herself that ought to be sacred. They ought to be places where nobody can tread. And I think in the context of instrumentality, where everybody's together and they can see that, it's like he's reacting to the fact that she was revealing it when it was very much improper to do so.
I guess that is supported by there's some dialogue where like one of her inner voices or one of the voices in that scene, Misato says like, no, don't show that side of myself to Shinji. And then one of the other voices is, actually, you want us to show this side of you to Shinji, which is an interesting way to establish character motivation that works at the end of the world. But I have to say, I didn't pick up on either of the things you guys are talking about. As I was watching the show, I thought they kind of fell into a copacetic sort of professional personal relationship, but perhaps I was just missing things.
The point that you brought up about that nakedness preceding the fall does seem to cast another light on that scene with Shinji and Kaoru in the bath.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely seems intentional in retrospect. Now that you brought that up, yeah, I would say with regards to Kaoru, one take that I would be remiss not to mention is the extent to which, well, I suppose that Kaoru could definitely resonate with anybody, but in particular, to gay viewers of the show, like when I saw it, I was definitely in the closet, but just the simple power of his just very casually saying, what I mean is, I love you, is like the experience that you have being gay is sort of coming to terms that if there is anybody that you have feelings for of the same sex, there is astronomically high, well, maybe I shouldn't exaggerate, a very high probability that they will most likely never really reciprocate to any extent. And so it felt especially powerful to see, sort of like it treated as a simple gesture like that. Definitely felt that, like I could empathize with Shinji in that moment to very suddenly have somebody treating you with a very innocent kind of, is it unconditional love that he had never really experienced before.
Yeah, I guess I might, at the risk of repeating something we've already said, that does, I think the need to like cover yourself and cover parts of yourself and all ties together with humans needing to have the will to live and the unpleasantness, the absolute terror, if you will, of keeping yourself, parts of yourself, away from other people. And many of the characters in the show have different perspectives about whether or not that's a good thing, whether that was a colossal mistake on the order of original sin and humanity should be destroyed because of it, or whether, actually the human condition is good and we have to strive to continue with that.
It's interesting because I didn't really read as such the absolute terror part of it being the solitude, but rather the lack of it. It was absolute terror to be putting yourself in a position of vulnerability.
Right.
Else.
Right. That's I should make myself clear. I think the absolute terror is at like, oh no, what if somebody could actually see my soul, which is maybe you find that relatable or not, but I think at least some people
Oh
certainly
no,
have
yeah,
that fear.
it's horrifying. I hate something I really hate is I'll go out drinking a few times to like an area and then I will come back and it's like the bouncers recognize me or that like the bartenders remember me and they're like friendly and it's like and then that's nice, but then all of a sudden it's like
You're no longer able to be anonymous.
yeah, I used to just blur out into the crowd, and now I'm very much like a figure, and I'm known, and I'm recognizable enough to, like I've actualized into something, and it just kind of there's something very disgusting about it that I don't like.
That seems like maybe it's the opposite, because if we dissolved everybody's AT fields, everyone would blur into the crowd of common humanity. But so I'm not sure which way to go with that.
Well, they do show crowds during the instrumentality scene of all the people in Japan and the people in the movie theater. I think there's something.
True.
I do want to get back to
right.
the gay stuff. I don't know. Like part of me, it's like it's hard to exactly interpret that scene. Like I think it's sort of like I think it's unambiguously gay and like very much homoerotic, and it's very much like just the intent for both characters. But there is also the theory, which I'm sympathetic to, but I think it just depends on like how you model gayness. And I guess not being gay, I feel like I can't really like I don't really have any room to talk, and so I'm just kind of like throwing theories at the show. Like I feel like it's just like it could just be people projecting things on there, but the common theory is that it's like Shinji is so kind of deprived of friendship, let's say, or he just like he doesn't have any like healthy male interactions, which he doesn't. And like in the show, it's like he's surrounded by women all the time. There's no real male friend. Like the closest he comes is maybe like he's got his friends at school, but like they start off hating him, and then he doesn't. He's never super close to them except in his fantasies. And there's like Kaji, who acts like as a surrogate father for like an episode, and then he dies. And I think Kaoru was like the first like very like healthy. I mean, I guess not healthy exactly because it's like a alien Jesus coming to you, like just loving you unconditionally for who you are. Like it's kind of like it's such a it's more of a divine love than anything. But Shinji's definitely in like it's completely unprecedented. He's never had anything like that in his life before, and so of course like he wouldn't necessarily know how to react except sexually. That's the theory, but it's still very gay. Like just in like very obviously, just the way it's written, the way like the dialogue is presented, the way like the cameras are shot, the way they blush, the way he blushes, the way he smiles. Like it's. I don't think that's like deniable. Like it's in the show, but I just wonder if it's like, did Shinji just happen to like want a dude, or is there some kind of like Freudian complex that's coming out here?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. Like especially in so far as you've got the lines from Shinji at the end of the episode or something like, was it Kaoru told me he loved me. It was the first time anybody told me they loved me. Now I realize that I truly loved him too. It's hard to say as to exactly what Greek word would be used to describe that, as to agape versus philia versus eros, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's hard to make that interpretation specifically of Shinji's character without well, I would say like without having it be sort of a reflection of your own take as to that kind of stuff, as to whether Shinji was really grappling with perhaps realizing that he did have some sort of attraction to, at the very least, Aoru specifically, and possibly guys in general, or if it was just that he was so starved of affection that he was very much willing to latch on to the first person who really showed him that kind of very pure, unconditional love. But it's hard to say for sure insofar as it comes so very close prior to the end of the series. Like if it had gone for like another 20 or 30 episodes after that, it
They might have
might
been banging it out.
yeah, it might have perhaps had more room to develop, but I think there's something very was it there's something very almost thematically significant about Kaoru being in so little of the runtime of the actual show and yet leaving such a deep impression.
You compared him to Christ, which makes a lot of sense in hindsight, but I hadn't thought of it before. And I guess just kind of like in terms of the just the biblical narrative, like Christ and Adam are sort of like they're kind of the same character. They're kind of not like Adam fucks up, so then Christ comes and he's the new Adam. He's like the replacement for him, and sort of he's the proper human, and then and Mary becomes the new Eve, which is also just extremely edible in its own like construction. And there's something about I guess the way Kaoru and Shinji interact that like it to me it almost sounds like I don't know like it almost sounds like God walking around in the garden like just hanging out with Adam where it's like here's like I've made my creation now I'm going to like love it unconditionally in like this divine way. Which and if we're following the Christian narrative then that would like just be Christ walking around the garden loving Adam, then Adam fucking up and I guess in this case killing him. Which is what happens with crucifixion. The I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but there's just kind of there's a parallel there, which I'm just and I think I'm allowed to make as many Genesis parallels as I want because the show is literally called Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yeah.
But it's there's something in there that comes out of the imagery.
I guess I'd like to double back and make really explicit that in my very vague understanding of Freudian psychology, I guess, are supposedly you become gay because you have like a distant father or a father you don't like, and you're overly attached to your mother, and Shinji kind of does that, so perhaps that's what the author was thinking like, and then Alien Jesus comes to him. And he gets really attached to Alien Jesus.
Does seem like Freud cites that as the etiology for like any old thing.
Yeah.
That's true.
Oedipal complex.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like if we're like gonna like really psychoanalyze it, then it's like like psychoanalysis like it always goes into well this means that like the creator is secretly gay and the whole show is him like grappling with his homosexuality, which is like actually kind of like a fun way to read it, but I don't think it's productive.
No. Well, I don't think you would have to do that. Although I do think it's rather tiresome to be like, here's what the creator may have thought. But like if he just believed Freudian psychology and constructed this character and said, so naturally, this character will act like this, then I've seen a lot of old movies back when many scriptwriters really believed Freud, and so they would have a subtext of a character being gay by like he's attached to his mother. I don't think I was going anywhere with that.
No, well, I guess that's interesting in that it doesn't matter if Freud's theories are true or not. It's just like whether or not they're in the cultural consciousness. Like if
Yeah.
enough people know Freud, then suddenly when you're telling a story, like the Freudian structure becomes integral to that. And like I don't, the director doesn't strike me as like a Freudian ideologue. He seems to know. He seems to be much more. I guess intuitive. Like there's just so much. There's just so many layers and contradictory things to the symbolism. I don't think he was doing some kind of like paint by number Freud, or else this would just be like an utterly mediocre show.
Yeah. Well, I find it very hard to analyze this relationship because this whole episode took me by surprise, and it's like, oh, hey, there's this new guy. Oh.
Yeah, I think that was very much sort of like the reaction they intended to evoke in the audience. Like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah, it's not a bad
We're this
reaction.
far into the series, and now there's this new person all of a sudden.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like in less skillful hands, that would come across as somewhat cheap, but it definitely hit home. In my opinion, to the extent that there's uh, every now and then you think back on. Well, I happen to think back on stuff like Shinji being faced with the need to kill Kaoru in order to
Right.
save humanity, and I think, oh god damn it. Yeah, it had to turn out this way, didn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was an extremely good scene that where they just like held on that still image of
Mhm.
Shinji in the Eva, sort of
Yes. Yet
coming to terms with it.
another way to make budget limitations work in your favor.
Yeah, and I guess it works because Shinji doesn't know what the heck is happening, uh, but he still has to, if we want to draw out the parallel any further, it's like forgive him for he knows not what he's doing, but also it was all part of the plan anyway. So double forgive him because he told him to do it.
It's almost like Shinji becomes like one of the apostles or like a saint or something. Like if we're running with the Jesus thing, then it's like he kills God, and then in Evangelion he goes and he gets himself crucified,
Right.
and then he
Yeah.
becomes
I feel like the clearest parallel to Shinji, if we were to extend that theme, would probably either be Peter or Judas, insofar as he finds himself in the position of having to be instrumental to his dear commander's death in such a direct way. Um, obviously there are a lot of different takes as to Judas in that particular situation, but at the very least, in terms of Peter, it seems like the dominant thing is it Peter denying Jesus and then all of a sudden being struck by just this horrible sense of guilt at what he had just done,
yeah.
which definitely seems to parallel Shinji's feelings in the aftermath of all that.
Hello, Obsidian. There's a neat take I like, which I never explain it very well, but there's this idea that the Peter's denial and then his weeping is a kind of it's an unprecedented literary convention, and that like if you look at any literature before the Gospels, it would never focus on like some peasant follower like just being like a whiny little bitch and oh he's crying or this or that, like that would just be something like shameful of well here's the lower classes just doing something disgusting, like why would anybody include that in a work of art except to mock them, and the gospel is very much not mocking Peter. It's and it's part of the like it's maybe one of the first cases in literature of like you get kind of this like very low character that you're supposed to be sympathetic to, as opposed to like the heroic, as opposed to the rage of Achilles and Agamemnon and their jealous struggles, because they're both so mighty and glorious. So this is something to focus on. Like yes, you can see their flaws, but it's kind of they're still better than you. And then pretty much all later literature reflects this. Everything after the Gospels, or and kind of as we get more into modernity, we kind of follow this trend to drastically oversimplify it. But you really start to see kind of a proliferation of whiny ass characters like Shinji. Where you could have just like in the extreme case, you could have a protagonist that's supposed to be, Christ and Adam and hero and little boy and, father and son. He's all these things, but, consistently what defines him is his melancholy and his low status and his inability to act. And then that drives a compelling story. And at least the what one theory goes is that that has its roots to the way Peter is portrayed in the gospel, because you just don't find anything like that in prior literature.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's no shortage of those sort of parallels and themes and connections you can draw. Well, in any series that uses it, that well, the sort of imagery and sort of terminology themes of well, Judeo-Christian spiritualism as heavily as Neon Genesis Evangelion does throughout its run. I know a point that you had brought up in the past, Jason, was that in an interesting way, like the sort of lack of knowledge on the part of the creators on many of the finer details of that sort of make it almost a more pure homage in a way, in that it seems to not have quite the same baggage. Well, that like the bits of the aesthetic that they decided to use in Evangelion, they were using without necessarily knowing about like the specific kinds of baggage that they carry in the West. Yet it definitely does come across as a rather it's pure homage to a lot of the themes that you see in things like the Bible, just in a certain way of being embodied in that story.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think whenever this comes up, I always think of like Dark Souls, where I'm blanking on his name, but the creator of Dark Souls, he came up.
Miyazaki.
Okay, yes, Miyazaki. He came up with most of the art, um, inspired by kind of these like medieval fantasy books, and they had English text. They'd be like these narratives of knights and kings and dragons and such, King Arthur, whatever. But he couldn't read English, so he just looked at the pictures, and then from the pictures that kind of stirred his imagination, he kind of created these various bits of mythos. But like, I mean, just aesthetically, Dark Souls is. Really just the first one. I think the other ones. I mean, Bloodborne's also really interesting too. But I think he could actually read like translations of Lovecraft. So that's a little different. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about Dark Souls that just to me it really captures that sort of aesthetic in just a much more interesting way than so many like I mean, what do we have here? We have Game of Thrones, or we have our own takes on that era, which is also weird because now like he's making a game with George R. R. Martin, which who knows how that'll turn out, but yeah, there's something to be said about kind of the artist's intuition and approaching kind of disparate things from a more just psychological, emotional, just seeing where the eye takes you, and then that seems to be a lot more honest than trying to reason to things, or to take on all the cultural baggage we have and something like American Christianity, which is just this crazy abomination in terms of imagery. It's all like Dante's Inferno filtered through like 500 years of interpretations, and then like the whole like TV specials from the 60s and like Charlie Brown, and it's just this hodgepodge of um, strange religious associations. They don't really make any sense.
So
I
if I
guess
read
that's.
you,
Oh, yeah.
if I read you correctly, perhaps Neon Genesis Evangelion is the Dark Souls of anime.
It's the Dark Souls of the gospel, I would say. It's I think
Like that would be like something in the Apocrypha, the Gnostic texts, or well,
yeah.
maybe the Dead Sea Scrolls. That definitely comes up in Evangelion. It's more as a plot device than anything.
Yeah, well, like I think their mention of the Dead Sea Scrolls, like they just talk about them because they're cool. There's nothing like super interesting in them besides confirming like that the texts are more accurate than people thought. But there's something about the I guess how loose the interpretations are played that I think recaptures the spirit of how you should approach these texts and how you should approach the apocrypha. Like for example, the idea of the apocrypha is like okay, here's these texts and they're not canonical. Well, like what does that mean exactly? Like it's like well, it means that there was a Bible committee in like the year 400, and they said, okay, well, these texts we're going to say we can trust, and these other texts we're on the fence about. Pretty much, as they didn't have enough evidence to confirm that these are legitimate by their standards. But most of those texts still entered like oral tradition, and things from those texts still like inform the way that people inform the other. Like it's just all part of like this big mythological tapestry. Like if you look at like Greek mythology, like there's like 7 different versions of the same story, and most of like the good versions of every story come from like fucking Ovid and Virgil. Like the original versions are like, oh yeah, we have this excerpt from the Homeric hymns that talk about Aphrodite for like 4 lines, and then it just trails off, and then we just get the rest of it from the Romans. Like that's how mythology works. Like it's this kind of breathing, it's alive, and it's always being reinterpreted, recontextualized. To read anything at all is always a creative act. You're in kind of a communion, you're a dance with the source material. And I think that's how early Christians treated their texts, because they had an oral tradition to go with it, and then they would give these galaxy brain readings of it. But I think that's how something like Evangelion treats all of the images it doesn't understand, is that it gives a creative reading of them that breathes new life into something that was otherwise dead and boring and like mostly unintelligible and irrelevant to us, and it makes it interesting. And it does the same thing with Freud, I think, and Adler, and these various, okay, here's these psychologists that assert a bunch of things that we can't take seriously, but then through the lens of the story suddenly it becomes illuminating and applicable and beautiful.
So you're saying we should have people watch Evangelion in Sunday school, and that'll
Scenes of it,
really,
yes.
Oh, nice.
I guess the question is it what would be the Orthodox take on Evangelion versus Catholic versus the Protestant?
I'm not actually that interested in that question.
Yeah.
That might just
like,
be getting down into minutiae.
They would really think, what a wonderful anime this man has made with weird Christian imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have some sort of interesting divergent explanations that would make everything all the richer.
I do think that the way instrumentality is portrayed is that it does seem very much like, I guess, like a Protestant fantasy or something, or at least like the way it's so abstracted and so kind of like just technological and weird and like removed from everyday life. And there's so many varying interpretations of like the second coming, but I think at least the Orthodox and to some extent the Catholic one, it's hard to pin down it's hard to pin down either one, but the Catholics have been so influenced by the Protestants that it's hard to say. But the more original interpretation is far less and more fantastical in a lot of senses. But it is like it's a much more tangible existence. It's like Jesus comes and he gives you like a fleshy body, and you live on Earth, and you're living a life again. But now everything's in kind of this nice harmony in it, like a city and a garden, and it's like you're not in some kind of wacko psycho realm where all barriers are devolved and we're all like in permanent forever ecstasy and forever oneness. That would be very much something you would see in more modern philosophy, where they try to kind of reconcile abstractions with ancient texts that were much more grounded in just like day-to-day existence.
Anything else you guys want to talk about Evangelion?
I mean, I'm sure that in the proper opportunity I could ramble on about this for a while, but I guess my closing quote, if any, would probably be from Uli Cooley, which was the next effort by the same studio, where the main character, who in some ways is very Shinji-esque, his father, who is not at all like Gendo, at one point remarks upon the TV-headed robot that's come to live with their family and work in their bakery. And he says that in response to people seeing and interacting with that robot, that could set off a chain of reactions across society, and then starts to ramble into nothingness. And then just as his voice subsides into the background, his son grumbles, You know, he once wrote a whole book about the mysteries of Ava, and his female companion says, "What?" So yeah, I feel like that's a fitting culmination.
I guess for myself, I should say that it really is a fantastic anime, and it's one of my favorite shows of all time. Now that I've seen it,
Wow.
yeah.
Yes, glad that you
Of
enjoyed
course, we would only pick good shows to watch, so it's not surprising that we picked a good
it.
one.
Then I definitely must recommend Fooly Cooly, because after I saw that, I felt that was probably one of my favorite shows. It is only 6 episodes.
Yeah, it's on my list. I'll get around to it one of these years.
Hmm.
And yeah, it looks Evangelion looks really good. It feels really good for a lot of it to watch and observe it. It has some parts of it that don't seem to fit together well, but I also like all of those parts individually. Like I like both the congratulations ending and in a different way. I like the everybody falls into the sea of Tang and comes back out or doesn't ending, even though they seem subtly at odds to me, even though they're supposed to be the same thing. And yeah, Jason, do you have any closing thoughts or anything else that you'd like to mention?
Be embraced, millions, this kiss to all the world. Brothers above the starry canopy, there must dwell a loving Father. Are you collapsing, millions? Do you sense the Creator world? Seek him above the starry canopy. Above stars must he dwell.
Amen.
The end. Amen.